I've spent just about my entire life on a basketball court. I started out shooting on a beat-up hoop back in French Lick and eventually found myself battling under the rafters of the Boston Garden. For decades, people have asked me the same question: who was the absolute best? Most players and coaches like to dance around that question. They give you the safe answer, mention a few different names, and avoid taking a real position. But if you know anything about me, you know I don't operate that way. I know which players were genuine problems on that floor, the ones who could have you sweating through your jersey, and the ones you simply couldn't stop, even if you knew exactly what play was coming. The truth is, I didn't really want to talk about this for a long time. It wasn't because I didn't have strong opinions. I certainly did. It was because, to me, basketball at its purest has always been bigger than any one individual. My entire career was built around team basketball, making the extra pass, setting a hard screen, rotating on defense, and throwing your body on the floor for a loose ball. I've always believed championships are won when all 12 guys are pulling in the same direction. It's not supposed to be one superstar doing everything while everybody else watches. Mind you, every once in a while, somebody comes along who changes the entire landscape of the game. I'm talking about a player so gifted, so competitive, and so relentless that every game plan you spent all week studying on film suddenly becomes almost useless. A player who makes his teammates believe they can do more while making the other side start questioning itself before the opening tip even happens. I've been fortunate enough to witness nearly 60 decades of basketball at the highest level. I played against legends whose names now hang in Springfield. I went to war with Hall of Famers, and later, as a coach and executive, I sat on the bench and looked across at men who could completely take over a 48-minute game without needing to say a word. Some had incredible physical size, others possessed passing vision that seemed almost impossible. And then there were those rare competitors whose fire was so intense that it felt like they might burn the whole building down just to win a preseason scrimmage. People think picking number one is the difficult part. Hell no. I knew who number one was the first time I stood across from him on the hardwood. The real challenge is figuring out who deserves those other 4 spots. I've shared the floor with players whose true influence could never be fully captured by a box score or a stat sheet. Some changed the way offenses were designed. Others forced defenses to completely rethink how they survived. And a select few changed what every kid shooting a basketball on a driveway in Indiana dreamed he could become. So today, at 69 years old, I'm gonna give it to you straight. No stat sheet arguments, no media hype, just 5 players who earned every ounce of my respect. These are the 5 greatest basketball players I ever saw. Number 1 on this list is Bill Russell, the ultimate champion and the embodiment of Celtics pride. When I was coming up, long before I ever wore a Boston Celtics uniform, the name Bill Russell was spoken with a level of respect you could almost feel in the room. People talk about championship banners. They talk about rings. But Bill Russell didn't simply win championships. He helped define what winning meant in team sports. 11 NBA championships in 13 seasons. Think about that for a second. That's a level of sustained success that is almost impossible to imagine being duplicated. When I arrived in Boston in 1979, Red Auerbach made sure I understood the legacy Bill Russell had left behind. You see, Bill wasn't obsessed with scoring 20 or 30 points every night. He cared about one thing above everything else: leaving the floor with more points on the scoreboard than the other team. He transformed the way people thought about defense in the NBA. Before Bill came along, defense was largely about staying in front of your man and moving your feet. Bill turned shot blocking into something that could immediately create offense. He wasn't just swatting a shot into the third row. He could redirect that block directly toward a teammate and turn defense into a fast break going the other way. But what I respected most about Bill was the psychological effect he had on opponents. He got into the heads of the greatest players in the world and stayed there. A player would drive into the paint, see Bill waiting near the lane, and suddenly change his shot in midair because he knew what might happen next. And on the other side, every teammate felt more confident because they knew Bill had their back on every possession. The way I see it, Bill Russell established the standard of selflessness, intelligence, and toughness that became part of Celtics basketball for generations. Without the foundation Bill built, guys like me, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish wouldn't have had the same understanding of what it truly took to raise a championship banner at the Boston Garden. Number 2 is Wilt Chamberlain, the most overwhelming physical force I ever saw. Back in my day, whenever old-timers sat around talking about pure physical dominance, the conversation almost always came back to Wilt. I was just a kid in Indiana when Wilt scored 100 points in a single game in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and averaged more than 50 points per game over an entire 80-game season. Looking back now, those numbers almost sound fictional, but Wilt was real. He was a walking, breathing athletic anomaly. What made Wilt so frightening wasn't simply that he was stud well over 7 feet tall. It was that he was an extraordinary all-around athlete. He was an elite track and field athlete, a high jumper, a shot putter, and he could run the floor with the speed you normally expected from a much smaller player. When you watch old film of Wilt, the first thing that jumps out isn't only how much bigger he was than everybody else. He was faster, stronger, and could get off the ground in a way that made no sense for a man his size. His presence was so overwhelming that the league eventually changed certain rules and dimensions of the game in response to the challenges he created. Here's the thing, people always wanted to compare Wilt with Bill Russell, and while Bill obviously won more championships, nobody could simply shut down Wilt one-on-one when Wilt decided he was going to take over. Put one defender on him and you were asking for a dunk or a foul. Send a double team and Wilt could punish you by finding open teammates. He was capable of producing huge numbers as a passer when opponents focused too heavily on stopping his scoring. The psychological pressure Wilt put on opposing coaches was something else entirely. You could spend an entire week preparing ways to slow him down, only to discover by the middle of the first quarter that your front court was already dealing with foul trouble. Whenever somebody asks me where physical intimidation in basketball truly began, my mind immediately goes to Wilt Chamberlain. He did things on a basketball court that seemed like they shouldn't have been possible. Number 3, Earvin Magic Johnson, my greatest rival and eventually my brother. It's impossible for me to talk about my career or my life without talking about Earvin Magic Johnson. From the moment we stepped onto the floor against one another in the 1979 NCAA championship game in Salt Lake City, our careers were connected forever. We were two young kids from the Midwest. He was from Lansing, Michigan, I was from French Lick, and for the next decade, we competed against one another for the soul of the NBA. I'll be honest, back then, I hated the Lakers, and when we were competing, I hated Earvin too. But man, did I respect him.
Magic was a 6'9" point guard with the court vision of a wizard and the competitive heart of a lion. Before Magic, players that tall generally weren't bringing the ball up the floor and running an offense from the point. Magic changed that. He pushed the ball up the court, directed the fast break like a conductor leading an orchestra, and made passing look like an art form. When we faced the Lakers in those intense finals battles of the 1980s, Boston Garden against the Great Western Forum, I knew every possession against Magic was going to feel like a chess match. Make one small mistake in your defensive rotation, and boom, Magic would find somebody with a no-look pass right on target for an easy basket. But what made Magic truly special was his ability to make everyone around him better. Guys like James Worthy, Byron Scott, and Michael Cooper could play with tremendous confidence because they knew that if they ran the floor, Magic would find them. I'll never forget Game 6 of the 1980 Finals when Kareem was sidelined with a sprained ankle. Magic was a 20-year-old rookie, started at center, scored 42 points, grabbed 15 rebounds, and handed out 7 assists as the Lakers won the championship. That wasn't just talent, that was courage, leadership, and an incredible belief in himself. Number 4 is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the definition of unstoppable consistency. There are players who give you 3 or 4 incredible years when they look completely dominant. Then there's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who remained one of the game's defining players for more than 2 decades. I played against Kareem when he was already in his 30s, and even then, he was the most polished and disciplined big man I had ever faced. Everybody talks about the skyhook, and for good reason. In my mind, it was one of the most difficult weapons in basketball history to defend. Think about the mechanics of it. A man standing around 7'2", releasing the ball from an incredibly high point, extending his arm and giving it that soft touch. You could jump as high as you wanted, and it still wasn't easy to get anywhere near it. You could have multiple defenders around him, and Kareem dominated with his skyhook, discipline, and consistency. 6 MVPs, 6 championships, and 38,387 points. And number 5 is Michael Jordan. God disguised as Michael Jordan. Jordan's athleticism was special, but his mentality made him unstoppable. In 1986, he scored 63 points against us, despite constant double teams. He treated every game like the finals and never backed down. 6 championships, 6 finals MVPs, pure domination. I was lucky to witness legends like Russell, Wilt, Magic, Kareem, and Jordan change basketball forever.